Thank you for tuning in to AM Radio. And let's go ahead and talk about one of the churches that was built, or I guess is around my parents' house. Now, let's go ahead and say this. It's literally right down the street from my parents' house. I'm not 100% sure what religion it is. I believe it might be Protestant. Now, I grew up right across the street from the pastor of the church. Friendly man, amazing family, just great. They're the type of church that they don't even allow their kids to watch television. Now, as I grew up, probably like I started finding out in like my early 20s, I started finding out a little bit more about this church. Didn't really look too much into more of the religion or the belief of it because every incident that I had with them, it was great. I remember on Halloween I would go ahead and swing by and they would have uh like cornhole games, like games you can go ahead and compete and you would get like popcorn balls and things like that. Had a blast. Great time. Now, I remember one of my friends went ahead and got really good with them to the point where they were doing like jobs for them, working with them, and things like that. And at this church, they wanted to go ahead and um, what is it called? Redo the bottom of the church, like the classrooms and stuff like that they had there, and that's fine, no problem. Like it was a Saturday, I believe, and they were just like, all you have to do is we just want to take out the ceiling and then replace it. So it was it was me, the friend that I had at the time was Ernie, and one other individual. That guy was the key holder. So he was the one that let us in the church and let us go ahead and do things that we needed to go ahead and do. And I remember being there and just entered the church. They locked the doors, of course, and then we went downstairs. When we were let into the room that they went, they were like, "We just need the ceiling taken out." They gave us each like sledgehammers that we would be thrusting into the ceiling and then taking down, and then like the ceiling would crumble. So that was like our main job, was just go ahead and just destroy the ceiling. So we're going ahead and doing that all throughout this big room. And I remember as we were doing that, I think like after like so many like 30 minutes of doing it was us three guys in there just knocking away all this stuff. All of a sudden we stopped just to get a breather, get like take our time, and we were just talking, and then like for some reason we all stopped talking, and we heard what sounded like a bang under, like, from wherever we were. We heard like a loud bang, like it literally stopped us from our conversation, and we could hear something very loudly walking over us. We were right under the walkway between the queues of the church. And it was strange because the person that we were with, he looked concerned. I remember being like, I was like, oh, okay, somebody else is here. And he was just like, he looked a little panicked to the point where we heard. I remember after a few steps, just like looking, was like, oh, hey, somebody else is here. And he's like, no one else should be here. It should just be us three. He stood up from where he was sitting and went upstairs. And I remember Ernie and I were just like looking at each other, and Ernie looked at me. He's like, "This happens all the time." And I was like, "What do you mean it happens all the time?" And he told me, he's like, "We'll be down here during," because he attended the church, And he said that like a lot of times that they would be there, no matter who's there, everyone would be downstairs and doing their studies and stuff like that. And he said that some it would sound like somebody's upstairs coming into the church, but then when they would go check, there would be no one there. And sure enough, after he told me that, I was like, okay. The guy that we were with comes back down and we're like, oh, who was it? He was like, well, there was no one there. No one came in. The door's still locked. And we're just like, what's crazy about that is I remember hearing somebody walking down the the middle of the churchway. Like if you like somebody stomping, like going up to like where you would speak at a church. And when he went upstairs, I didn't hear anything. It was silent. But he said he checked it, so I didn't even hear him going up to the doors of the church. Um, it it's weird. The other strange thing was that I had heard stories of that church. It it was kind of like one of those weird things. Like growing up, I would always walk by that church, going to friends' houses or stuff or whatever at night, Friday nights especially. They're they're one of these churches. There's nothing wrong with them, and I remember being there a couple times and taking friends to that church because I'm a very open minded person. I go ahead and experience things like that. I remember being at that church, and I would during their I guess their congregations. They're very lively, and what I mean by lively is that during their prayers and their they're just like spiritual nature, there would be somebody that would run around all the cues, like literally like would run laps pretty much in the church around everyone, you know, doing his prayers. It was very an enthusiastic prayer and just thing like that. So they really put in their faith into their belief, and that's completely fine. And I remember I would walk by the church when I wouldn't go there to see what was going on or to just attend and give my respect to them. But when I would walk outside, I remember I would see silhouettes when they would have their gatherings run past the windows that they would have of their church, and I would be able to hear them singing their songs and doing their prayers, and it just seemed like a very friendly place. But I was told that at that church, their pastor, who was this really strong looking individual, did exorcisms, and I didn't want to. It's you hear the word exorcism and immediately think of course the horror film Exorcist. Now, I I didn't believe it. I it's still kind of hard to believe personally, but I remember being told that no, like there are people in my city that I grew up in that had experiences like that, and they would go to that church because they would do it, and that the pastor is the person that would run it. I've heard stories that they would bring in people that were going through those hardships. They would be speaking in tongue. They would be cussing at the pastor. They would fight tooth and nail with whoever was bringing them to into that church. They would be cussing, screaming, yelling in the building, but they would do the exorcisms in the church wing, and right where they would have their gatherings on Sundays and I think it was Thursdays. But whenever they would do these exorcisms, it was done with the windows closed, very hush hush, and the only people that were telling us were people that lived across the street from their church. They would tell the neighbors, and the neighbors would tell other people, saying that, yeah, sometimes you could hear screams, you could hear foul language, cussing, and you would specifically hear the pastor's name. I'm not going to say his name, out of respect for him. He's a great individual, but all the stories I ever heard was they would always cuss at him. I don't know really what to say. I'm not a very religious person, but I respect all beliefs. And I'll tell you this, like, just to know that that church that is a small church that would most likely have that kind of like just atmosphere when I would be in that in their church, when I would go just to go ahead and attend their preaching, or when I would go to help them do anything, or like attend their gatherings and stuff, I would feel great. There was no any hardships. But when I went ahead and helped them to go ahead and renovate like their downstairs, I it felt weird. It felt different than any other time that I had been there. And just to be told, like, the stomping was so distinguishable. It was so loud that there's no mistaking that there's somebody in that church. And then to be told that there's no one there, and then also to be told, be like, this happens a lot. I remember my friend Ernie said because he had been there many a times. He's like, there's always a sound that somebody's there or doors slamming. I didn't hear doors slamming, but I definitely heard the stomping, walking down the the middle of the church. It was scary, and it was like an uncertain feeling. I remember I was friends with the pastor's son, and because of their setup there, when I was learning how to play guitar and stuff, like he had the keys, and we would be able to go. He was a drummer, and he would be able to play drums, and I would be able to go ahead and play guitar, and we would like play in the church. It only happened one time, but I remember being able to play Slayer at that church's using the microphone equipment and all that kind of stuff. I remember playing Slayer in a church, so I have that badge. But the supernatural things that happened there, things that happened that I could not explain. It, it's a weird feeling. I mean, the people there are very friendly, but the church is a very uncomfortable setting, especially if you get into the basement area or the rooms under there. I'll also say like the area around there is just it's it's a little bit different. You definitely feel as if when it gets dark around that church is like you do seem to like check behind you a little bit more often. There's a definite sense of paranoia just in that block area. Well, I mean, I guess that's it. I mean, it's an experience that I had. Go ahead, leave a like, leave a comment, ask a question, try to answer it. But overall, take care.